today's seminar. Today we have Ezzat, who is a PhD student at Zürich. So maybe I start with his background. He did his BSc in mechatronics at University of Waterloo, 2014, and then MSc at ETH, and then he started his PhD at IFA. He works on socio-technical control and like mechanism design, game theory, and he's gonna present Karma Economies today, and we're looking forward. Yeah. Over to you, Ezzat.
Yeah,
thanks for joining.
Thanks a lot for your kind introduction, and thank you all for attending. I will. So I defended my PhD thesis about 2 weeks ago. So I will try to redefend it today to you. It's titled Aligning the Socio and Socio-Technical Control, Trustworthy, Fair, and Efficient Resource Allocation with Karma Economies. I'm also, so I'll show some of my thesis work, but I also hope to have some time to discuss some future ideas as I am looking for next steps.
The first time
we tested this a couple of times, but of course, when it's live, it doesn't. Okay, here. Here is a typical utopian vision of the future smart city that you see nowadays. These envisioned cities will be highly sustainable with seamless integration of renewables, highly efficient with things like autonomous vehicles or drone seamlessly coordinating traffic. And of course, this is all will be enabled by advanced control and automation. But let's get a bit more real. We are talking about socio-technical control systems that have humans involved, and humans are complex. So whenever we have humans, there are many complex factors to take in mind, other than the traditional engineering pursuit of efficiency. And in our work, we focus on these three from many other important factors, but arguably these are, let's say, the most fundamental factors are trust and fairness in addition to efficiency. I will be defining these notions as we go along, but for now, an informal introduction. You can think of trust as the basic property of an automation or a technology that it must be trustworthy to the humans, so it can encode things like transparency, but mostly we define it in a game theoretic sense that the technology acts on the human's best selfish interest, because if it does something that I don't like, I will not trust it. Then fairness is highly contextual and complex to define, but let's agree that it's important for now, and we will define it as we go along. Efficiency can also mean many things. For now, think of it as a basic ability to tailor to human private preferences. So, for example, if we are relying on humans to provide flexibility, we should be able to take into account if sometimes they are highly urgent and they do not want to provide flexibility. And we'll revisit these concepts as we go along, but already if we want to achieve these three basic properties, trust, fairness, and efficiency, we run into a world of trouble, because conventional wisdom dictates that they are jointly incompatible. So arguably, achieving fairness and efficiency without trust is not very meaningful. But let's say in an ideal world, one could have an all-knowing, centralized controller that knows all people's hopes and needs, and one would achieve it. But of course, this is only an ideal. Trust and fairness can be achieved with things like simple turn-taking or uniform splitting of resources. But as soon as we want to tailor to private preferences, we want to be efficient, there are classical impossibility results in economics that dictate that the only way to do that it's impossible to do without money in general. So, and that is why we say, okay, if you want trust and if you want any efficiency, we need to introduce money. Money is, of course, a very useful device. It's what keeps the world afloat. But we argue that in these socio-technical contexts, it's not necessarily fair, which of course we can debate all day long, but let's agree that it's the use of monetary socio-technical control is oftentimes controversial. I show here the three, let's say, canonical socio-technical control problems or domains: data networks, transportation, and energy. I mostly worked on transportation, worked a bit on data networks. Energy I haven't worked on much, but that's why I'm here. But these examples show a varying degree of public sentiment on whether the use of money is okay or not. So in the example of data networks, you may recall the heated debate surrounding net neutrality around 2010 that showed a strong public sentiment that we should not, let's say, monetize internet too much. We should not charge different kinds of internet traffic differently, because that would threaten the integrity of the internet. So that there was a strong sentiment that money is for sure not fair here. Transportation is maybe a bit more messy. There are examples of monetary socio-technical control that made it to the ground, such as these dynamically tolled priority lanes in California. Of course, also congestion pricing in some cities, which speaks that, okay, some people accepted it, but it still remains highly controversial, and most cities do not want to adopt these kinds of policies. Energy now, this is the one I'm least familiar with. But the idea is that, okay, perhaps, I mean, there are monetary electricity markets, and it's highly monetary, which is perhaps suitable in the current centralized market structures, because the energy is owned by some entities. But perhaps as we move into the prosumer era, where the energy becomes, let's say, more of a public resource that everyone can generate or use, we suspect that similar controversies might pop up as in these other examples. So the central question of our work is, can we get rid of money? Which is not easy, but the short answer is yes, and we are lucky in these socio-technical kind of problems to have some nice structure, namely that many socio-technical resource allocation are highly repetitive. So people don't need roads or energy or internet once, but many times, essentially for the indefinite future. And that allows us to introduce this instrument called karma, which allows people, which resembles the notion of, if I yield today, I gain karma. If I do not yield today, I lose karma. So it makes people pay against their future self. And I will now dive into all the work we did around this concept. So it's all based on a simple yet not super well appreciated realization. And in my PhD thesis, we developed a theory of karma economies spanning these four, let's say, quadrants, from game theoretic modeling to application and traffic congestion management. Also spent some effort trying to define what is fairness and efficiency. And lastly, we've also done some experimental validation and behavioral studies. So I'll try to cover three of these and then get to some future ideas. Starting with the application. I like to start with the application because it helps pin down some concepts. So here is an example application of the so-called bottleneck highway problem. So imagine that there is a highway connecting, let's say, the suburbs to the city center. And let me briefly explain why this highway tends to be congested in the morning. So the highway tends to have some fixed free flow capacity that if it gets exceeded, it leads to congestion. But in this example where, let's say, we have 9,000 people wanting to travel in the morning in this highway with this capacity, a simple conservation law dictates that this highway will be occupied for, let's say, 2.5 hours. So here I am trying to show both space and time going, let's say, backwards from right to left. And so this highway would be occupied from, let's say, 7 to 9:30 a.m. And there are a couple of ways in which this can happen. The efficient way would be for the commuters or the cars to spread evenly across these 2.5 hours. Then we do not have any costly congestion. But of course, this is not what ends up happening because it's not a game theoretic equilibrium. The selfish behavior of the users, namely they mostly want to depart at some certain time, let's say this T star, which is 8:30, for example, would mean that this desirable flow cannot be sustained as an equilibrium, because if the road is in free flow, everyone will start traveling at 8:30, causing some congestion. And ultimately what ends up happening is that at equilibrium is that more people than capacity travel in the early hours of the morning, leading to some buildup of queues. And then in the later hours of the morning, the queues dissipate. So how can we remedy this? Well, I've already alluded to these kinds of priority lanes earlier. That is one conventional way to remedy this using money. You can alleviate congestion. I mean, in theory, you can alleviate congestion in the whole highway with some kind of dynamic pricing, dynamic congestion pricing, where you charge the highest amount of money at the most desirable time where everyone wants to depart, and less further away, and that could lead to that could in theory lead to free flow in the whole highway. But it's been seen that that actually just doing it partially tends to be more publicly acceptable, because at least there is this free option. So yeah, so this is an example of what people have done, and of course, you can think that who ends up getting used to using these priority lanes. In California, they've been nicknamed Lexus lanes, so they are not without controversy. But now this is a good point to introduce this notion of urgency, which is crucially time varying over days. So many classical models have something called the value of time, which is a fixed static attribute of each commuter. And that tends to be highly correlated with income and so on. Instead, because we will look at, we will leverage the fact that people will use these lanes not once, but many, many times. So there is room to define urgency or need in a non-monetary manner by looking at the dynamics. So or changes or time varying nature of needs. So you can imagine that not everyone has the same needs all the time. Maybe sometimes they have high urgency because they are late for an important meeting, and on other times it's a normal day where they are less urgent. So here are the standing assumptions about urgency. We consider that they are exogenous, so they come from outside your, let's say, outside life. They are independent across users, so everyone has their own process independent of others, private to each user. So the central planner does not know these urgencies. But because we'll be looking at the large population settings, we can group users in a finite number of these urgency types, and we represent them using finite state Markov chains. So with this bit of preliminary, let me now finally demonstrate what a karma economy would look like. So this one mirrors these priority lanes, but we do it with karma instead of real money. So we also would split the highway into some priority lanes and some general purpose lanes. And we will regulate access to these priority lanes such that they are always in free flow using karma. So here is how it would work. Every user would have some tokens of karma, which is a non-tradable credit. So you cannot trade it for money or anything. You can only use it to access priority lanes. And imagine that you would have some kind of interface like this. Then each user would choose when to depart during the morning rush hour, as well as place a bid to try to enter the priority lane. And depending on when you depart, other people would be departing similarly to you. We would take the highest bidders up to the free flow capacity of the priority lanes, and those are the ones that get to enter the lane. But for that, in exchange for that, they have to pay karma. So if you bid larger than others, you enter the lane but lose karma. And crucially, this is one of the big innovations, is that we collect all these karma payments and redistribute them, let's say at the end of each day, such that if you do not get priority and end up getting stuck in traffic, you gain karma from those that gain priority. And that's what inspired the name of karma, that what comes around goes around.
Sorry, so the total karma in the system is always the same?
Yes.
Okay.
What if I get a car and start driving, do I then get kind of karma budget? And so the karma in the system rises by 10 or something?
So that what's important is the average karma in the system.
Yes. Yeah.
So we will give everyone when they enter, let's say 10 karma, and then the average karma is 10.
Yeah.
So because it's it is large population settings, so you're playing against distributions and so on. So what's a bit trickier is when people leave the system. You would still want to preserve the same average, so you would need to redistribute karma in a maybe if they had more than the average, you burn a little bit of karma on but the idea is to preserve the average. Okay. So this is how the scheme works. I'm skipping lots of technicalities here because I want to give a primer or a demo of the kinds of results we get. Here is a simple example where we want to compare the karma allocation with like a classical monetary tolling allocation. And we split the highway 50-50 into priority lanes and normal lanes. And we consider that the users follow a homogeneous urgency process where they are in a rush half of the times and not in a rush half of the times. Our theory predicts that the priority lanes under karma will be allocated efficiently to those that are in a rush. But in a monetary world, as I alluded to earlier, we would need this additional piece of information, which is willingness to pay. And so you could have the, let's say, rich businessman who's always who can always afford to enter the priority lanes, whether they're actually in a rush or not. And there is overwhelming evidence that willingness to pay is highly correlated to income, and essentially price out some more vulnerable users. And you end up having that, the priority lanes are allocated based on income rather than a notion of true need. And this actually is interesting because it shows that money can be also inefficient. So we always say that money is unfair, but if you define efficiency with respect to these time-varying processes, then money is also inefficient because it doesn't necessarily serve those that are most in need. Here's the theoretical results behind these predictions. what I just mentioned can be formalized of equity under heterogeneous income. That, of course, income doesn't affect karma. That can be formalized as a scale invariance property. So these, for example, you can, if you were to measure this urgency monetary, it would look something like this, where the rich businessman, for example, has 10 times the urgency of the vulnerable person. But of course, with karma, the scale doesn't matter. So these two processes are equivalent. What matters is serving, tailoring to the dynamic variations in needs. And the second theorem relates a property called strong Pareto improvement, which says that with karma, everyone can strictly benefit, and keyword strict, over if you don't do anything. So if we let all the lanes be congested, everyone essentially is able to enter the priority lanes and gain benefit. Whereas with money, even if we assume somehow that everyone has the same scale or have the same average income, there are one can construct examples where still some people get priced out of the use of benefits. So I will now move on to the more theory part, which is the game theory behind some of these predictions I just mentioned. So these karma economies lead to something that we call dynamic population games. They've been also referred to as mean field games, but we like to call them dynamic population games for some technical reasons that will be apparent in a bit. But here are the basic constituents. We are interested in these large-scale societal systems where there is practically infinitely an infinite population. So there are many individuals. And if we look at a representative individual, it would have some individual dynamic state, such as their urgency and karma. And we are using discrete state and action spaces. They would also have some single stage or immediate action, such as their bid, as well as when to depart during the morning rush hour. So that's all private and individual. But if we aggregate over this infinite population, we get distributions as social states. So the social state is a macroscopic quantity describing what's going on. And it consists of two things, a state distribution over these private states. So this says the fraction of different individuals in different states, as well as a policy, which maps individual states to actions. And we assume that users of the same type all follow the same policy. That helps with tractability. And then, okay, so this is on the societal level. Back to individuals, each individual then faces a decision problem, a Markov decision process that, as classical Markov MDPs, is characterized by some immediate payoffs. So given my state and action, I get some immediate payoff or stage payoff. And also my state would transition according to some probabilities. But the main difference to normal MDPs is this coupling through the social state, and that's what makes it a game. So it's not that every individual faces a time invariant MDP. It faces an MDP that is a function of what everyone else is doing. And we follow this notation where square brackets denote discrete quantities and round brackets continuous quantities. So these discrete quantities are individual quantities typically, and continuous quantities are these distributions over the societal quantities. Long story short, this is the solution concept we're after in these kinds of games. It's called the Station-Nash equilibrium, And the predictions I showed earlier were at this stationary Nash equilibrium. So I now define it. It is an extension of the classical Nash equilibrium. If you're a bit familiar with game theory, you would maybe recognize this condition. B here stands for best response. So the policy needs to be essentially optimal to itself, with respect to itself, with the caveat that these are empty best responses in a Markov decision process sense. So they are best responses with respect to the delta discounted infinite horizon rewards. But in addition, we require this stationarity condition that these state distributions are stationary at the equilibrium, which you might if you're familiar with Markov chains, resembles the stationarity condition of a Markov chain. P here is a state transition matrix, but what's non-standard here is that the state dynamics are a function of the state distribution. So ultimately, we're looking for a fixed point of this pair. So it's quite non-standard, but under some assumptions. The first one is a mild continuity assumption that is standard in game theory to guarantee existence of any kind of equilibrium. The second one is maybe the more interesting one, karma preservation. So we cannot create karma out of thin air. So yes, we have to redistribute the whole karma and preserve the average. And that's needed to guarantee that the economy is essentially well behaved and there's a single equilibrium. Otherwise, the behavior wouldn't be stationary. So with this, for any given level of system average karma, we can guarantee existence of equilibrium. Yes.
Well, what about uniqueness? You said how do you know it's unique?
There is no guarantee of uniqueness. That's open. And actually, there are examples of non-uniqueness when we take lambda to infinity, or not to infinity, to 1. Like if we're not discounting, then you can construct non-unique examples. Essentially, it doesn't matter if everyone bids 1 or if everyone bids 5. Like you just what matters is that you match the average expenditure of everyone else. But with discounting, it seems empirically to be unique in the sense that we did lots of computations and we always end up with a unique one, but we couldn't prove it. This is another result that is not just for karma, but more general, this class of dynamic population games. We think it's a neat little theoretical result that establish a connection between these dynamic games to their static counterpart. So there is a class of games called population games that are well studied. If you're interested in game theory, I always recommend this book. It's one of my favorite treatments by William Sandholm. It's called Population Games and Evolutionary Dynamics. But these are static counterpart where there is no individual state dynamics. So it's like you're playing the same game over and over. And this result is why we called it dynamic population games, because it's like the extension of this to the dynamic setting. But then we show that formally you can reduce the dynamics. So for any dynamic population game, you can define a static one whose Nash equilibria coincide with these stationary Nash equilibria. So we can map back to the simpler setting. And the proof idea is that you can define the immediate payoffs in the immediate static payoff as the Q function, the state action value function, and then you can invent a new kind of players that play or that resembles like nature, play the dynamics and try to bring the system to play. And this is a cool result because there are many computation tools that were developed for these classic static games, which are the ones that we use for our dynamic ones. And this relates to your question of uniqueness. So typically, people always prove uniqueness and convergence together. There is some kind of contraction. We could not show that. So we do not have either uniqueness, non-convergence guarantees. But using this result, there is a large library of tools that end up working in empirically. So yeah, there are all these different evolutionary dynamics that converge to Nash equilibria with different guarantees and so on. Although we couldn't find one that actually has the guarantees we want, but they end up working well in practice. So using these computational tools, here is an actual example of what an equilibrium of the karma economy looks like. This is for a bit of a different setting than these priority lanes. It's for a setting where there's also a large population, and two people get drawn randomly to play against each other. So it's inspired from something like meeting at intersections. But the important thing to look at is what an equilibrium looks like. So it represents some kind of bidding policy. That's this pi star. So this is an optimal bidding policy for this example with a discount factor of 0.98. And you see that high urgency tends to bid higher than low urgency. And this is quite cool. You wouldn't see this in any, let's say, monetary model where we also can get the stationary distribution of wealth, essentially. So this is the stationary distribution of karma in the population. And these two together tell the story, because you might look at this and think, okay, we have efficiency because high urgency bids higher than low urgency. But there is typically a small loss in efficiency due to something like this, that you're out of karma to signal your urgency. But it tends to happen as the discount factor gets large quite rarely. So this is an equilibrium that is almost fully efficient, except for this very small probability that some high urgency people might have karma of 2, I think, and not outbid most of the low urgency people.
Sorry, well, it's not clear. Now, which people do you select? So you have a limited, I don't know, capacity for your road. This is the supply functions, the karma bids. And how do you pick who should use it?
Yes. So this is actually for, sorry, I missed this. I did not present this detail. This is not for the priority lanes where there is a fixed supply. There, the bidding functions tend to be different. They tend to be either bid higher than some threshold or lower. You end up having these clearing bids. That some people bid those or a bit higher, and everyone else bids lower. This is an example where we draw two people randomly and they bid against each other.
So it's not a clearing mechanism.
Sorry?
But this is not the clearing.
It's not a clearing mechanism. You need to outbid a random opponent. So, but everyone has the same urgency process. So when you bid against someone, if you have high urgency and the karma 5, you would bid, let's say 4, and your opponent will bid most likely 2. So the high urgency people outbid the low urgency people the vast majority of times in this pairwise setting. But the story is similar in other settings where those that have high urgency are the ones that would get in also at the most desired times and so on. So that's the most of the theory. The next quadrant gets into economics. So I've talked so far about fairness and efficiency a bunch of times. It was a big challenge throughout my whole PhD to formally define them, but we think we have something nice. Yeah, it's super complex always to define these things. There are so many definitions in the literature, and it's highly contextual and so on. But the dynamics brings a neat new angle. So let's break it down together, and let's hope to agree that if we consider that everyone follows the same dynamics, then it's straightforward to define fairness and efficiency, because we can prioritize high urgency, and that is both fair and efficient because we are serving those who have more needs, and because everyone follows the same process, everyone will have their own turn to have high urgency. So it's also fair, we're not discriminating against anyone. Where it gets tricky is when we have heterogeneous dynamics. And it's tricky because it's not straightforward that we can do interpersonal comparisons. So this is an example with two dynamics that have the same urgency on average. So we try to make sure that the long run average urgency is the same. Well, karma is scale invariant anyway, so you can normalize it to try to get some comparability. But even if you do that, this is an example with 50-50 between urgency of 5 and 1. And this one is 25% of time you have urgency 9, and 75% of the time you have urgency 1. But it's still not straightforward to compare this 9 to this 5, for example. They happen according to different frequencies and so on. So we try to define fairness and efficiency in a way that still prioritizes high urgency and somewhat, but in an interpersonally non-comparable manner. And this led us to this beautiful social welfare function, which is called long-run Nash welfare. Maybe you've heard of Nash welfare before. I'll talk a bit about it. This is the long-run extension of it. So Nash welfare is defined as the product of utilities, essentially, or improvements of utilities to some benchmark allocation. We adopt the definition for an infinitely repeated setting, where we define it based on what we call long-run allocations, which are probabilistic allocations that mapping urgency to some allocation, and this is essentially what would happen, what would unfold in a long-run average sense. So I'm skipping some details, but let me try to motivate a bit this choice, because this is a never-ending quest. What's the right definition? But we think that this one has some nice properties. So the classical Nash welfare, we claim it's a not so hidden gem of social welfare functions, because it's well known in economics, or at least classically, but in engineering and in many systems, social welfare is always defined as the sum. And not that many people look at this one, at the product. So this one is the product instead of the sum. And that might sound random, like why would you do a product? But it has some beautiful properties. The first motivation comes from social choice theory, and that's the one that we've mostly followed. It is the unique social welfare function satisfying basic axioms of efficiency, such as Pareto efficiency. Like Pareto efficiency is the weakest notion of efficiency there is, that says, like, essentially there is no waste. If there is a way that everyone can improve, we should do it. Without making interpersonal comparisons. So it does not compare directly your urgency to my urgency, but it rather tries to find efficiency gains in a way that does not compare them. And I will illustrate that with an example in a second. The second motivation also comes from bargaining theory, and it's interesting. So the name Nash welfare, it's not to be confused with Nash equilibrium. So it does not have anything to do with Nash equilibrium. What it has to do is with Nash's other seminal result, which is called the Nash bargaining solution. And that is a popular solution in economics for the so-called bargaining problem. That's when two people or two or more people need to bargain to find an outcome that is beneficial for all of them. And typically there are many ways for the outcome to be beneficial that can be highly unfair. And Nash solution is one of the popular solutions that is deemed by many as fair, and also it's the one that ends up being selected if you do some repeated bargaining or sequential bargaining. So it has lots of foundation. And it's interesting to look at these socio-technical problems as bargaining problems, because essentially we must decide as a society what kind of controller to adopt. And if negotiation fails, you end up doing nothing, like such as in New York City, the negotiation lasted 70 years. Finally, they adopted congestion pricing, but for a long time they were doing nothing. So yeah, it's these are some motivations for our choice. But if we go back to our example, once you see it in action, it's also pretty beautiful. So this is back to our example of allocating priority lanes with four heterogeneous, with users grouped into these four processes. All these processes have the same long-run average urgency of 2, but vary in their dynamic nature. So the red one is static, so you have the same urgency all the time. This pink one is, eighth of the time you have high urgency. And this is, I want to make the point of what the dynamics and the repetition brings. So this is what would happen if you maximize Nash welfare on a day-to-day, on a day separately, on a single day only. And because it doesn't make interpersonal comparisons, it has some scale invariance property. If you look at these things on a single day, the urgency is essentially meaningless, and it leads to some trivial equal splits of resources. And maybe that is part of the reason why Nash welfare is not used a lot, because in single shot settings, it tends to just flip a coin or split equally. But Nash welfare with dynamics is where some magic happens. This is now when we maximize long-run Nash welfare, taking the dynamics into account. And let me explain this a bit. So this is how the priority lanes would be allocated over different times in the morning. And T star, if you recall, is the most desired time. So you can think of different time slots as different resources that are differently desirable. And everyone wants this T star the most. And this is where you see some kind of maybe bargaining or fair trading going on, because those pink users that have very high urgency infrequently end up gaining a larger share of the most desired resource. But on the other hand, those static users gain a larger share of most other resources. So essentially, you manage to tailor to these dynamics in a way that makes everyone benefit and does not discriminate against anyone. So it squeezes efficiency gains out of the dynamics without discriminating against anyone. It satisfies scale invariance. It satisfies the strong Pareto improvement property that we showed earlier. And that's why we think it nicely formalizes both fairness and efficiency. This is the last result of the thesis. I don't want to get a bit too much into technicalities, but we establish a link between the equilibria of the karma economies and this maximum long-run Nash welfare. It's not a universal link, so there are some conditions that need to hold. And we established this link for a different notion of equilibrium called karma equilibrium, not stationary Nash equilibrium, which is a relaxation of that stationary Nash equilibrium, where the main relaxation is this budget balance condition that requires that karma budget are satisfied in a long run average sense, not strictly every time step. So it's a relaxation, but this relaxation allows us to have an elegant link when we consider the budget every time step. It becomes rather difficult to analyze. And for this notion of equilibrium and under some assumptions, the first one is not that important, is IID urgency. Before we were considering general Markov chain urgencies, but we think this can be extended. The second assumption is the one that's more important. It's an assumption on the structure of the maximum long-run Nash welfare solution, which has some Lagrange multipliers associated with making sure that we satisfy probabilistic constraints. And essentially, if depending on the heterogeneity of the urgency processes, these constraints could bind in a way that penalizes users unequally. If that doesn't happen, we get a connection. So the maximum long-run Nash welfare solution is a karma equilibrium. And this essentially concludes the story. We defined fairness and efficiency jointly as long-run Nash welfare. Trust, we defined it as that we have an outcome of a game theoretic equilibrium. So you can think of it of Bayesian Nash incentive compatibility. And well, without trust, you can maybe just centrally maximize long-run Nash welfare, which is only an ideal because these urgency processes are private. If we are lucky and this Nash balance condition which holds for many classes of urgency processes, but not all of them, and this is we're still investigating this a bit, we can maximize long-run Nash welfare at a game theoretic equilibrium of the karma economy, and with that we managed to achieve all three pillars. The last corner is on experimental validation. We tried this out with real humans on Amazon mTurk. It didn't work as well as our theoretical predictions predicted, but it wasn't that terrible. So yeah, it's a promising start, but more needs to be done on the experimental side.
Do you know why it didn't work as you expect?
The short reason is that Amazon mTurk is very noisy. So the subject pool that you recruit does all kinds of random bidding, but it was still not totally random. So so it was random, but in a good direction. We ran a pilot or a complementary study in a game theory class. At the beginning of the class, so the students didn't know yet game theory, but I guess they were motivated, and they did very similar to the equilibrium. So and the best performing online participants on mTurk also did quite close to the equilibrium. So yeah, we think that if there is more skin in the game, let's say, it would get closer. But it also means that we should think of simplifying the game, because especially if let's say it becomes something like energy that is really continuous, you can't expect people to be on their phone bidding all the time. So yeah, we need to automate that somehow. Okay, so these are the conclusions. We get trustworthy, fair, and efficient allocations. We've developed some game theory with well-posedness and existence guarantees, and we showed that we approximately maximize long-run Nash welfare, which embodies fairness and efficiency. And I have some slides on future ideas, which I don't know if we stop here and take questions or.
No, we have 10 minutes, so maybe we can stop and
Okay.
ask questions.
Okay.
Let's see.
Yeah.
So with the karma concept and the priority lanes,
Yeah.
then pricing is kind of set dynamically, right?
Yeah.
And so is it just set on a per second or per half hour basis or something?
Yeah. So that's, let's say, one of the implementation details that we conveniently neglected because it's more theoretical at the moment. But the idea could be maybe every 5 minutes or something like. Yeah. So you would bid, or the car would bid on your behalf, maybe 5 minutes before you approach these lanes. And then you would get a flag that yes, everyone that bid within the same time, you're playing against them, and you would get a flag that yes, you can enter, or no, you can't enter. Yes.
Everyone paid the same lowest accepted bet.
It doesn't matter. How we did it is everyone pays their bid.
That they
Yeah.
did. Okay.
But then these equilibria I showed, because they are long run kind of equilibria, everyone ends at the equilibrium bids, the clearing bid.
Okay.
So at the equilibrium it doesn't matter, but it could matter in like once you consider some behavioral aspects.
I'm curious about the assumption of constant expected urgency across players.
Okay.
Because I mean, I think for me, on average, my urgency to get to work is lower than for the average nurse going to a hospital. Like I think.
Yeah. So
if I had different averages, how would that affect the results you got?
So this is one of the issues of defining what fairness is.
Yeah.
And the issue is, but when you say that, the statement you just made requires interpersonal comparisons.
Mm-hmm.
So you are declaring that nurse is more important than you,
Yeah.
and that is a form of interpersonal comparisons. Yeah. And it's very tricky to do these in a fair manner. Yeah. If you have, if there is societal consensus or some kind of objective consensus that a nurse is more important than you, then sure.
Yeah.
And maybe there is, but then it's very difficult to say by how much.
Exactly. Yeah.
So we think it's elegant to just not do any comparisons. Now, one thing I did not cover is that there is a weighted version of this Nash welfare where you can give people different weights.
Okay.
And that translates, that is equivalent, that would be maximized if we do non-uniform redistribution of karma. So instead of everyone getting the same karma, you can have different shares of the redistribution. And so you could give the nurse more karma from the redistribution than we give you. Now, how much? That's very tricky.
Yeah.
And but maybe there is societal consensus on how much. It's still better than, let's say, summing your rewards, because you would still, the guarantees that everyone will improve, and many of our guarantees would still hold.
So you distribute karma to everyone equally?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's the vanilla scheme. But in an extension, you can make it non-equal.
Just to fully understand, let's say that Asmus and Shobit, they bid the highest karma, 10 and 9.
Yeah.
They get the road,
Yeah.
19. All of the rest, we didn't get the chance to use the road. So you distribute 19 karma equally among us.
Of them too.
And also them too?
Yes.
Okay.
This is an implementation detail. It makes it easier for the analysis to give them too, because it doesn't matter. Like, the important thing is that they lose karma. So they will still be losing karma because the average will be less than much less than what they paid, depending on the scarcity.
I have a question, like, I think it was slide 15, maybe.
Okay.
Sorry.
I forget it.
It's more on the assumption of the urgency, because I guess that is one of the state, right? And you
Yeah.
define as a private state,
Yeah.
meaning that you know the urgency of the players, or you have an estimator, or you have perfect knowledge, and what happens if you have noise on that? I'm seeing this from
Yes.
more a control strategy.
Yes,
right?
yes. So in principle, we don't know the urgency. So
Okay.
the scheme does not require any knowledge of the urgency. Where you need to know the urgency is to compute these equilibria. So when we computed the equilibria, we made some hypotheses about the urgency to illustrate what would happen at the equilibrium. But the idea is that these equilibria would arise in a decentralized manner, so based on your individual behavior. So we would just set up from a system level, you would just set up this bidding scheme, and people would bid according to their own interest. You don't need to care about their own interest. But if they end up bidding according to the equilibrium, which is what we try to validate with this experimental study, then we have efficient allocations. Fair and efficient according to all the stuff I mentioned. Now this has a drawback that we're moving the complexity to the users. So some users might not be happy about that. And one of the directions that I started, but I want to continue, is something in between where there is some kind of automated bidder bidding on your behalf. So maybe, yeah, to what level the end user is involved is a bit up for question. I think it depends on the context as well. But there is a spectrum of things you could do. Maybe you ask them only for urgency, so they declare their urgency, and you suggest a bid for them. It becomes like a recommender system that they can still override, or maybe maybe you just ask them for urgency and bid on their behalf. They cannot override. Maybe you just let them bid. This I think it depends a bit on the problem. Yeah.
So in the short term,
Yeah.
if I want to go drive a car tomorrow and then there's some kind of event that happens, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not aware of the event.
Yeah.
Then this does this
Yeah.
affect the efficiency there? Because it doesn't really seem like it gives me an incentive to drive it another time.
Yes. So here we are looking for all these stationary notions that assume that every day is the same, but individuals have only the individuals change according to these urgency processes. An interesting extension is to have some non-stationary environment where you have these shocks that affect everyone. I have ideas on how to do it. You can still introduce some kind of global state, and then it depends on if that state is observable or not. If it's observable, then you can adjust. Like if there is a football game, or I don't know, a storm or something, then it's observable, and you can adjust your bidding behavior. You would think that, okay, this would lead to more congestion, so I should bid higher. If it's not observable and it just happens, then maybe you would keep it in your prior, right? So then you would, if you want to be more safe towards it, you would anyway, in general, bid higher. But the beautiful thing about the bidding scheme is that even if you get the bids wrong, we make sure the resources are allocated efficiently, and it still will be then you will end up having that those who have the highest karma tend to be the ones that bid the most. So although there are more people who want to get in, you will end up giving them to those who have the highest karma, so they have the nicest history.
Maybe a bit of a connected question, because that maybe raises a question of, I don't know if you could call it incentive compatibility here.
Yeah.
Because if I know there's going to be a big game,
Yeah.
couldn't I just then get in my car and drive to earn some karma? Because I know that everyone else will pay a lot to be in the
Yes.
priority.
Yes. So we actually we redistribute karma to you whether you drive or not.
Okay.
That's why I said it's easier to just redistribute to everyone. So we've done some studies along these lines, and we've seen that if you redistribute only to the active users, you can get kind of this fake driving or fake congestion. But instead, you can just redistribute to everyone.
But do we
which has
guarantee of incentive compatibility based on what Asmus asked?
um,
Do we have it by design?
sorry.
Do we have incentive compatibility guarantee by design?
So we do not have incentive compatibility. It depends. There are different definitions of that. What we have is Bayesian-Nash incentive compatibility, in the sense that all these predictions are Nash equilibrium predictions. So given that everyone plays Nash equilibrium, you would also follow this Nash equilibrium. So that's called Bayesian-Nash incentive compatibility, which is stronger or weaker than like strategy proofness, where you bid truthfully regardless of what everyone else does. We don't have that one.
I don't remember the slide number, but it was where you define maximum long-run Nash welfare.
Yeah.
And you say that if in a single shot setting, it just flips a coin. That's right.
Yeah. This one.
Yeah, I think that's one. Yeah. So in single shot setting, how can you elaborate more? Like, why does it lead to just random allocation of resources?
Yes. Excellent question. So in a single shot setting, because we have this large population assumption, it means that if I look at one day, I would have 1/4 times 1/8 of people with this urgency, 1/4 and times 1/8 of this urgency, 1/4 times, I don't know, 0.2 with, and so on. So you would have a bunch of people with urgency 1, a bunch of people with urgency 2, a bunch with urgency 3, and a bunch with 6 and 9. And Nash welfare is scale invariant. So this product is a scale invariant, which means that all these urgencies it would treat as one. Like they hold no information. Like one single number representing your need does not hold any information.
Okay.
So it's really it comes. One analogy I like to say is that if we want to split an apple, you and I want the apple by 10, you want it by 1,000.
Yeah, doesn't matter.
We're splitting it 50-50 according to this. But if there is an apple and an orange, I want the apple by 10 and the orange by 11. You want the apple by 2 million and the orange by 1 million. Then I am getting the apple, you're getting the orange. Like it will leverage any heterogeneity, but not. It will never compare our absolute utilities. It just finds efficiency gains from any kind of heterogeneity. Yeah. And when you look at these in a single shot manner, there is no heterogeneity. Yes. But then when you introduce the dynamics, there is heterogeneity, and it extracts efficiency gains from it.
Shall we conclude?
Oh, yeah.
Good. So let's thank Ezzat again.